Hey guys, welcome to Code Decode. Today in this video, we are going to cover some Java 8 optional interview questions and also some scenarios where we are going to use these optional in our real-time IT world, that is by doing CRUD operations.
Please like, share and subscribe to support us, and we are setting a like target of 500 likes.
So when I was just starting with the optional, I was just was in a learning phase. I understood that most of the documents, most of the blogs, most of the places where I can see is this is how they have created an optional object and this is how on it which they have performed operations to showcase what optional was all about in Java. This is not a real scenario, right? You will never assign something to null and you will never make an object out of that null and make a container out of it. This is not a real scenario. Similarly, if some places I've seen that they have created an array of strings and then on that particular array of string they have created option to check whether that particular array doesn't contain null or not. So this is also not a real time scenarios for us. Now, being a backend developer, you are facing an interview with Java. They must expect that you should have some knowledge on using these optionals on CRUD operations like on find by ID, find all, add, update, delete. How would you use this optional in your real world is what is important. So today we are going to see interview questions and simultaneously we'll see how to implement it in our CRUD. So let's get started. So the very first point that came to our mind while starting with the optional is that why optional? Why do we really need optional in Java? So optional was a way to deal with null values. Then why optional? So it is used to represent a value which is present on or not, and in Java 8 a new option was available in java.util package. Now null pointer exception is common. So what we used to do was we normally used to add frequent null checks in our code to check whether variable is empty or not before using it. You might sometimes forget doing it. What will happen? Your code will break. If you use try catch and you have n number of lines in it, all these lines, if null pointer happens, will be ignored and catch will be executed. So that is also a loss. So optional provides a very better approach to handle null pointer checks in our code. Now, what is optional? Optional is nothing but a container. Consider it as a container. A container can contain a value or cannot contain a value. But for sure that container operating on that will not give you null pointer exception at least. So let's get started. So you can see this CRUD operation. Which CRUD operation it is? This is R. That is retrieve the value and you are going to retrieve it with a given ID. So let's see whether this code is working fine or not. So if I'm going to give you an ID, it should respond me with that employee object. So if I give you an example of my employee table, this is my employee table having 6 rows where 5th and 6th row's name is null. So if I try to hit it with 3, I should get 3 comma code. So let's see if this is running. So if I hit it with 3, it should return me 3 and code, which is expected. Now if I get 5 as ID, it was going to return me 5 and null. Right? So how is this working? This is working because what we are doing here is we are just getting the ID. We are going to do find by ID and get. So how are you? So this find by ID is an internal class which returns you an optional. So after Java 8, now the find by ID's return type is optional. And with this option, how do you get an object out of it? With a method called as get. So this is so good. I'm getting my response. What do you think is a problem in this 2 line of code? It is working such a fine way. Now if I give you an ID which is 15. So do you think my ID 15 is existing? So there is no value or no row who is having ID as 15. So what it will do? It will break your code with no such element exception. Even though you are using optional, still your code is breaking. What is wrong you are doing in this code? So the wrong thing is line number 44. It's already screaming around for you that it can contain or cannot contain. I'm giving you an optional. Don't just go away and get the data. You should first check whether that is present or not. If it is present, then get. Else return a default value or return an exception that no value is not present. So the problem in this line of code is the get method. So the very first thing I am going to cover in this video is which method is a flaw in optional class and which is going to get deprecated in the foreseen, because of foreseen exceptions is going to deprecated in the real future. The answer to that question is a get method. Now a get method can return a value if wrapped object is not null, if it is null, it will throw an exception. No such element exception. I've shown you. The exception that was thrown was no such element exception. Now, a major flaw with get method is ideally optional should help us avoid such foreseen exceptions. Therefore, this approach works against the objective of optional and hence is going to be deprecated in near future. Now, if you should not use get, what you should do? What you should actually do is you should first check whether it is present or not. If it is present, return it, else return a default value. So what I'm going to do is, what this repository.find by id returns you? It returns you an optional. So the return type of this is going to be optional. It can contain an employee or it cannot contain an employee. Now I check if is present. If it is present, return e.get, the method which is used to fetch the data out of container. So it should be inside if block. So if it is present, return it, else return a message. Sorry, employee with given ID is not present. And the status should not be okay because you don't find it. So it should not be not found. Now, if I hit it with 15, it says, sorry, employee with given ID is not present and your code does not break with an exception. So this is the beauty of using optional. What you did, you used an existing optional return type of find by ID. You saved it in an object and you checked. If it is present, return it using the get method. If it is not present, return a custom exception with the proper HTTP status. So this is how you use it in real world, in CRUD. So when we have an optional object returned from a method or created by us, we can check if there is a value is present in it or not using a method is present. So we have used the method is present. This method returns true if value is not null. In our case, the value was null and hence else was returned. If the value was not null, that means if I have given you 5, it would have returned me the employee object. So this method returns true. If value is present, it returns false if value is not present. Suppose this is empty. So I check if it is empty, then it should say sorry, it is empty. Else, that is a not condition, you should return it. So it will not change our response. It will remain same. See? With 15, it says sorry. So the both are opposite of each other. So as of Java 11, you can do the opposite with is empty method. So it's none, but the same thing is present and is empty is just the opposite of each other. You can use not and use it in the same way as you use the is present. And how do you actually create an optional object? So we already have many methods to create it. The first method is optional.off. Now, I'll give you an example in real world. Okay, you have an employee table. You have ID and name as its attributes or the parameters. Now, I want you that go and fetch an employee with given ID and return me name in the uppercase. How will you do that? So, what will I do is, given an ID, I have fetched your object. Now, I'm going to check if it is present. Then, get the employee and get its name. If you try to get the name and dot to uppercase, if I run it, it will give you null pointer exception. So this is the exact case when you should create an optional object. So what you should do is, you should create optional name equals to, and the type should be string, get name. And the method is optional.off. So this is how I have checked that if is present, get its name. If name, so I have a container named as name. It can contain a value or cannot contain a value. So what I will do is name dot is present. Return name dot get dot to uppercase. Else return which says name is null and name is not found. Simple. If I try to run it with 3 now, what will happen? It will return you the name with code in a big letter. So the 3, the name was code and it is returned to you in uppercase. So this is the beauty of using optional.off, and this is how you have created an object. But still there is a problem with the object creation with off method. Why? It will return you null pointer exception if you pass an argument which is null. So now if I try to pass 5 here, the name is null here. For 5, the name is null. So it will give you null pointer exception. So see, you have got the null pointer exception. So this is why even if you are very sure that you are passing an element which is not null, then only go for this off method. Else you could have used off nullable. Now this method of nullable is going to do what? It is going to create a container named as name, which is going to contain either the name or it is going to be empty. But for sure, if this is null, it's not going to give you null pointer exception like we used to get in off. So if I run it now with 5, initially with the single optional.off, when we were creating an object of optional, it was giving me null pointer exception. Now it will not give me null, rather it will contain empty container named as, which is pointed by a reference called as name. Now it check if name is present. It says no, name is not present. The container is empty and hence it will go to else. And it says name is null. Sorry, not found. So this is how this is the best way to create an object of optional using off nullable. So the way to create optional is, we can create optional using the static method of optional, that is off. But you should be very sure the argument that you are passing to off method should not be null. Otherwise, you will get null pointer exception, like I have already shown you. But if you expect some null values, you should always use off nullable method. By doing this, if we pass a null reference also, it does not throw an exception, but rather returns you an empty optional object. So what was an empty optional object referenced here? With a name container. It checks if name is present, then return to uppercase, else give the message to the user that name is null. So this is how we have created an optional object. Now we have conditional check with if present. Okay, so what we have done is we have checked is present. There is one more method called as if present. What does it do? If enables us to run some code on a wrapped value if it is found to be non-null. What we used to do is we used to check if name is not null, print something. This code check if name is null or not before going ahead and execute some code on it. It's not just lengthy, it is also prone to much of the errors. What if we forgot to perform the null check? What if I forgot to check whether name is null or not? My code will break and null pointer exception will happen, which is a runtime exception, and my code fails then and there. And this is a very poor programming. Now optional, what it does is it helps us deal with nullable values with enforcing good programming practice with if. And how would you do that? I'll show you. So you have used so much of if-else conditions, right? What rather you can do apart from this is in single line, what you would have done is you would have checked name.ifPresent. Now it takes a consumer. What consumer it takes? It takes a lambda expression consumer. So I'll give it that if it is present, name such that print name is present plus name. Let's see the console here now. I'll clear the console. Currently, I'm going to return null and we're going to check this on console. Let's quickly hit it with 3. And let's see the console now. It says name is present and the name is code. We have hit it with 3 and on the 3, the name was code. And hence I can show that if name is present, you should print the name. So this is if present method for you. What if I want to do if name is not present? So this you have taken an optional. You have checked if name is present. Then do something. What if it is not present? There is no way to handle it also. So what we can do is there is one more method in Java 8 which is name.ifPresent or else. Now what it takes is first is a consumer, which is when name is present what you have to do. And second is runnable. And it says what if empty action is there. That means if name is not present. So we have already done what if we have a name. So take a name and print the name which is present. But what if name is not there? In that case, we don't have anything as an argument. So it's going to be empty. And what you should do, I should print, sorry, name is not present. So let's quickly try running it. With 3, it says name is present. And now I'll remove the console. And if I try to print with 5, on 5 the name was null. So sorry, the name is not present. So this is how you can use if present or else. So very important interview question is given an employee table, fetch employee with a given ID. So the ID given was 5 and 3 to me, and print its name in uppercase. So currently we are just printing it, so I can do is dot to uppercase. Okay, now if I hit with 3, I should get code in uppercase. So do I get code in uppercase? Yes, I get it in uppercase. So this is a Java interview question. Given an employee, fetch an employee with a given ID and print the name in uppercase. If it is null, print the name is null. So we have already the name is not present or name is null. So this is how we have done it in one single line in Java 8. Now I have so much to continue, like default values with else, or else get, and many more things. Difference between or else and or else get, very important from interview perspective. But we will be covering in the second part. So if you want me to cover it in the second part, and if it is really being asked in an interview, just let me know in the comment section. I'll create a video on this also. Thank you.